Well, a very good day to you. Welcome to today's episode of The Big Question. I'm your host here, Simon Irungu. And of course, with your help, I'm always, through the comment section, I'm always able to come up with these questions that keep on coming every week. And always here to help us tackle this question. I'm always joined by the resident guest, Professor Herman Manyora. How are you doing, Prof?
Good.
Looking good in a black suit and a white polo shirt, pull neck.
Completely.
Okay, now, the elections results were announced on Monday. I believe that was on the 15th of this month, 15th of August.
Yes.
And schools are reopening already, just a week after election. That is sooner than previous years. People resuming jobs the day after the declaration of the presidential elect. Prof, am I right to say that Kenya has matured from previous years when it comes to election?
Absolutely.
What would you say about the current state of
We're
Kenya?
getting it right.
We're getting it right. External media stations.
We're coming to witness bad things, but they have carried their cameras back.
What are they going to be reporting to their
They have
media
nothing to
stations?
report. Yes.
Okay, now let me ask you, let's get to the big question, the question for today. A question one might ask, looking at the previous polls before election, everything was indicating that Azimio has this seat. You at some point saying that they're even going to be having a 60% lead. Now the question one might ask is, where did they miss it?
I don't want to look at it as missing. From the opinion polls, you could see that the race was a little too close. So that is reflected in the numbers we have so far. Nothing spectacular has happened. Some of the factors that could have come into play to seal Raila's victory and maybe give him higher percentages. Maybe they did not come into play in the manner they should have come into play. On both sides, the low voter turnout distorted the picture. Affected both sides differently. That's one of the most noticeable factor that could be responsible for the low, put it like low victory, if you want to call it like that.
Okay. Yes. Okay, now let's look at some of the factors, Prof. We saw how Wetangula was able to marshal in numbers for the Kenya Kwanza team. Had they underestimated Moses Wetangula?
No, even Raila, when he was in Bungoma, he said, you people, you are deserting me. You have been my people. Now I can see I'm at 40. And Wetangula is at, Kenya Kwanza is at 60. There's nothing spectacular about that was known. Secondly, people are using this Bungoma without knowing that even in the last election, it was almost 50-50 for Jubilee and for NASA. So maybe Wetangula has just pushed it up by about 10%. 10-12%. It's nothing spectacular.
In politics,
one of the things about Bungoma, first, it has a Kalenjin constituency. Mount Elgon constituency. That's Kalenjin. You naturally expect them to vote with Ruto. Secondly, the Pukusu, who are the most popular as Luya, are sometimes very defiant people. They have had their own issues with Raila Odinga. In the last election, I think they still had the same issues. That explains why it was 50-50. So there's not much you can, from where I sit, Wetangula did much better than Mudavadi, but there's nothing spectacular about what he did.
Okay.
One of the reasons why Trans-Nzoia and Bungoma didn't register the number they should have registered for Azimio and the members of parliament and etc., was because whereas the new party called DAPK was a good thing for them, for Azimio, to be the one facing Ford Kenya, CS Eugene Wamalwa and Wafula Mnyinyi and Seli completely got it wrong. That thing got to their head when the party was well received. Instead of concentrating on Trans-Nzoia and Bungoma, they spread themselves too thin. They began saying this is the Luya party and therefore they should even replace ODM. And they fielded candidates across Western Kenya. If they had concentrated on Bungoma and Trans-Nzoia, we could be talking about a different thing.
Okay.
But for that reason, they have paid heavily, including losing. Wafula Ominyi has lost, Simiyu Eseli has lost, and so on and so forth.
Wafula Ominyi among the big names
Yeah,
that
yeah,
have
because
lost.
it got to their head. They couldn't believe they could start a party like that and it gains traction. So it got to their head.
So they just had a perception, but
Yeah, so they spread across and tried to fill candidates across Western. Oh, no, that was a big mistake they made.
okay. Now there is a Kiswahili saying that says maji yakishamwagika hayazoleki. But we are seeing that the Azimio team has decided to go to court.
Correct.
We don't know how things are going to play out.
Certainly we
But perhaps let me ask you this: what were they supposed to have done, or what should they do if the court rules in their favor?
One of the best speeches I like most in American concession and accepted speeches, the one I'm most likely to be found watching and listening to over and over again, is the McCain's concession speech. I like it so much. And there's a point in which he says, there's nothing more we could have done. Elections have their own challenges. And there are dynamics about elections. Sometimes looking for mistakes and people to blame is not always a good thing to do. But just on top of my head, I think the biggest problem with the Raila campaign has always been the inability to protect the votes.
What do you mean by inability to protect the vote?
You know, this is Kenya and this is Africa. You need to have your agents well trained, well recruited, well trained, well resourced, and even paid well. So this is one area where Raila's campaign has been failing all along, and a lot of things. Because what we are witnessing, social media, what we are hearing, if it is true that there was malpractices, there were malpractices at the polling stations, but that is just a direct result of not manning your polling stations. Yeah, so that's one thing that one would identify without running the danger of saying we have begun looking for mistakes or profiling people. That's the one thing that comes to mind.
Okay. And looking at numbers don't lie, people say. And people say that Raila has a majority of has caught a large number of Kenyans. So how should he have protected his votes?
You know, Raila is a magnet. He attracts people. And people love him. You can see the victory nobody seems to be celebrating it.
Okay.
You can imagine if it was Raila. And you can see how people are quiet across the country.
So people in Kericho celebrating Eldoret,
just expecting
in the
Kericho,
mountain.
Kapsabet, and a few pockets. If it was Raila, the country will just burst out. I don't know whether he expects the same love to be extended beyond voting.
Okay.
To ensuring his vote is protected. That may as well be, but he has not mobilized the people in that regard. People love you, they come to vote for you. But you haven't asked them to organize themselves to protect your vote. Not by mobs, that's not what I'm talking about. Ati piga kura na ulinde kura, no, that's a foolish way of doing things. An organized, well-structured approach to protecting your vote in a civil way. Ensuring you have agents, you have recruited them well, you have trained them well, and if they are to be paid, if they are not volunteers, you have those to pay, you have volunteers. That's the bit I am talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now talk to me about the mountain, because clearly the mountain took the center stage in this year's general election. You sometimes back saying that Raila might actually get maybe up to 30% of the total votes in the mountain, Prof. Looking at Martha Karua, looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta, maybe perhaps was there maybe one of them who maybe undergave what was expected of him?
I choose to look at it differently. We did say that Raila will need about 30% of the mountain.
But clearly, if he had 30%, we will be having this conversation because we will be celebrating.
Listen again. But again, we did say that Ruto will need to marshal a 30%, an 80% turnout. So you see, that turnout didn't work for Ruto. And therefore, it could correspond to the low percentage that he got. So if I still keep with my argument, Raila required between around 25%, to be very comfortable 30%. And at that time, Ruto will be having a 75-80% turnout. So when the turnout moves for Ruto to 60%, the one we knew, because we hear the others, the one we knew on the first day, then Raila no longer needed as high as 25%. So what he got was still good enough.
You're talking about 25% of the population of the mountain, or 25% of the turnout?
Of the vote
or the
cast.
Okay.
And the votes cast to constitute about 80% of the registered voters.
Okay.
An 80% turnout would be good for Ruto, and for Raila to do something, he would need about 25% of the vote.
Okay.
Now, since Ruto did not get 80%, instead got 80%, correspondingly, Raila did not need a very high margin of the votes. The turnout had already robbed Ruto of like 3 million votes, almost 2.5 million votes. Just the turnout itself.
Okay.
So now, since that was his basket, okay? And if the turnout robs him of about 2.5 million votes, Raila needs just about 800, 900 of the 3.5 million votes that were supposed to have been voted in that time, or 3 million.
Okay.
He ended up getting maybe 500,000. Not very bad. Yeah. Nothing really changed in terms of the dynamics, in terms of the factors I thought would play out to give Raila a win. Nothing changed from the mountain.
Okay.
That turnout, people blame Martha Karua and Uhuru Kenyatta. It could have been higher. Fine, it could have been higher for the sake of Raila, but it could have been worse. It could have been. The way I choose to look at this thing is Raila's influence and Martha's influence have an impact on the voter turnout. They created voters who were doubtful, who began to doubt their support for Ruto. You get it?
Okay. Because
of the messaging from Martha. In fact, Uhuru created almost fear in some voters. This man, mnajaribu kuchagua huyu. So that doubt and fear, uncertainty, contributed to the low turnout. Now, if somebody will argue that is a national development, I'll tell him no. Because Mount Kenya is to Ruto, or should have been to Ruto, what Nyanza was to Raila. Because whereas the other parts of the country had low voter turnout, the people who supported Raila because they are his people, the turnout was high. So was Ruto in Rift Valley. Ruto had his home on the mountain more than the Rift Valley. So because the people are so chided with Ruto, one would have expected them to vote almost in a similar manner as if they had produced a son of their own or a daughter of their own. So I therefore conclude that low turnout is partly the effort of Uhuru Kenyatta and Martha Karua.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We have been recording a lower voter turnout as the years progress, Prof. Why is this?
People are getting disillusioned. Politics doesn't seem to mean to people what it has always meant. People are seeing all around them suffering and misery, unemployment, and poverty, soaring food prices, cost of living that's unmanageable, loved ones dying because of medical facilities and lack of attention. So what is politics doing to us? What are these leaders doing? So that disillusions people. But there's something else. And this is, and I've mentioned this from 2017. When the people who process an election mess that election, there are many people who say hakuna haja kupiga kura. Hata tunapiga kura alafu inaibiwa.
So is it going to get worse as the years progress? Yeah. Maybe 2027?
This year we have voted less by more than 1 million people. Less than those who voted. You expect the number to go up because the register also grew by 2.5 million. Correspondingly, 15 point something people voted. You'd have expected at the very least 16 point something. Now we went to 14, almost 13, 14 flat, 14.2. It's that kind of thing. I can tell you here, if this thing continues the way it's going, hardly 10 people will vote in the next election. 10 million people.
10 million.
Hardly. Give or take one. It will be 11, 10, or 9. So we must guard against theft of elections. And when there are complaints, they must be processed properly. IBC must be above board. The Supreme Court, whenever they receive a case, must be serious and thorough to make a decision without fear or favor, and punish the culprits. If we don't do that, I can tell you, in another 10 years, you will have 3-4 million voting.
Okay. Perhaps as we wrap up the conversation, because every voter is needed to vote. It is their right.
Correct.
It is the right thing that they should
Correct.
be actually be doing in order to change the country.
Yes.
Now, how is the voter won back to voting, and who needs to win them back?
Confidence. Whoever takes over government this year must solve some of these solve these issues. High food prices, high fuel prices, unemployment, low-hanging fruits. Stop corruption, stop theft. Let there be money to support people, to give subsidies and give fertilizer to people. Then people can see the government, they can feel government, they can sense it. You get it?
Okay.
That kind of thing will be good. And then forever communicating with the citizens of the country. And then when IBC sets out to do registration, they must have better ways of communicating to the younger people whom you are targeting. Okay? And the politicians, the way they go about their politics should be attractive to the youthful population. The issues they are raising must resonate with the youth, with the young people. It's a very youthful population in this country. But basically, we must restore hope in the voter. First, by sorting out the small issues like food and so on and so forth, the prices, but by ensuring that the elections are conducted in a manner that leaves people satisfied that this indeed was a well-managed election. And whenever issues are taken to the Supreme Court must look at the issue with a tooth comb and make a decision that will deter further electoral theft. Okay. And punish those responsible for the same. That way will bring back confidence in the voter. But now you ask people, I've met many people say I'll never vote again. Kama tunapiga kura alafu inaibiwa hivi, so that kind of thing is not good.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, guys, that's where we wrap up the conversation. Well, thank you so much for staying through the conversation. I have been yours truly, Simon Irungu. We'll do have this conversation again. And before we leave, thank you so much for 100,000 subscribers.
Thank you very much.
We're really, really grateful. We were able to achieve our goal. It was our goal before the election, and you made it happen. Well, till we have this conversation again, enjoy the rest of your day.